Hello, party people. Dr. Alex here with you. I'm so happy that you're here. Today, I wanted to talk about the bedtime routine reimagined, and it's reimagined specifically for femininity and feminine balance. So, I have yet to finalize what the masculine version of this will look like because I'm not very masculine in my nature, like the way that I am naturally. And so this episode is going to be on the feminine, though I would like to bring in, and I'm thinking through and chatting with people about what it looks like to have the masculine version. Okay, so just wanted to say that right off the bat. But basically, what has happened in my own life is that I've been I've been sharing. I had realized how much the lack of masculine feminine balance within me and within the expression of my life impacted my relationships, my income, my what I did all day, my habits, all of that stuff was impacted by masculine feminine balance and not really knowing very much about it and not navigating it intentionally, and in a lot of ways it just wasn't that good. Like things didn't flow easily. There wasn't a lot of peace there. That kind of stuff is what alerted me to the problem to begin with. And now on the masculine feminine series, on the podcast, we have been going through all of that, right? And I've been sharing it with you. And this one, this is because it's an Alex Unplugged episode, this is a less formal explanation. And what I want to do here is really just bring in what it's looking like for me, like just pull back the curtain and share something that I've been chewing on. Because even though we're talking about these overarching large concepts and digging into those, the way that it looks like day to day in a practical sense is then often really different. And it's kind of like self-love, right? You can read about self-love, you can conceptualize self-love, you can think about it, but then the question that most people have is, what do I actually do that makes me the identity of being someone who loves themselves and expresses self-love? It's the same thing with masculine and feminine. So because I'm predominantly feminine, this is why it's going to be skewed towards that direction. In theory, though, even though I'd like to do a separate episode from the masculine perspective, it actually can be inferred from this discussion anyways, right? Because if one expression of it can make choices to do it, then the other side can as well. It's more just, are we asking the right questions? And more often than not, the habitual questions you ask determine much more your life than the habitual things that you do. Because the things you do change day to day, as they should, or some people just set their habits and kind of forget it. It's the asking the right question of today, what do I do? Not just what have I done in the past. That really leads to success, more flexibility, more flow, and ultimately better outcomes for what you want in life. So with this whole unfolding of masculine and feminine within myself, one of the things that I have more recently began to shore up is reimagining a lot of my routines. And one version of this that has become really central and important has been a bedtime routine. Now, I have had lots of iterations of bedtime routines. Back when I had chronic pain, endometriosis, infertility struggles, all of those things, I had very regimented, forced bedtime routines. When I healed the endometriosis symptoms, the hormones got balanced, the inflammation got handled, the brain chemistry got normalized, the pain went away, all of those things. As that happened, then the motivation, because it was always away motivation, right? It's away from the pain I was feeling, would drive me to force the routines. As the motivation away from something bad waned, the motivation also did. And so bedtime routine for a while went through like a whatever. And then it came back, the pendulum kind of swung more towards the middle, where I I had clear choices for what I wanted the bedtime routine to be chosen from, but each day I could decide which unique combination of things I wanted to include in a bedtime routine. So it began to be much more responsive to my day, to my moods, to my energy, to what I was wanting to do, craving to do, the whole thing, just merging more of it in my life because forcing it, you can do it for a while. But honestly, it starts to feel so bad to gaslight yourself through not being responsive to yourself in real life that eventually the misery of it, or, something will happen where the misery just gets to the level where people just aren't sticking with it. And that's why, on the flip side, finding that ease was really helpful for me. Now, fast forward to much more recent, the last couple of months, and in hiring a new coach that I'm working with, I discovered that me personally, I was still seeking more of stepping into my femininity and embodying the feminine nature that I have within me and expressing it fully in the world. The reason that that is important is because I want to find what is authentic to me, the level that allows me to live life from the most place of ease and joy and flow and creativity and passion and creation and intentionality and purposefulness as possible. When I deny where I naturally want to be, then I use up a lot of my energy to create that instead of creating the results that I want. And then I bump against the outward manifestations that are the feedback for me that say, hey, this isn't quite authentic to you yet. Now, it's interesting because in the past, that would have really set me for a loop because with perfectionism vibes, I was definitely like, if I have to reiterate something, it means I messed up the first go at it. I did something wrong. Woe is me. I'm bad. And I would just go into my whole self-pity thing, right? Or I'd be angry, like, why didn't this person help me the first time? Rather than seeing that the pendulum swinging only can respond to the work that you've done so far, and that continuing to move it and continuing to get feedback and information is actually the best thing that can happen to you so that you make your life and the things that you think and feel and do and engage in all actually aligned to who you want to be and what feels the best to you. Right? The fights, the disagreements, the misaligned work, the clients that aren't jiving with you, all of that is often what it looks like. And that alerts us to disalignment. And because that started or it didn't start happening, I started noticing it actually happening. And it even extended into things like, as I did more and more stuff in my life, now it's all things I want to do. It's all things I'm excited to do. It's all choices that I made. But the stress level started to get real high, fever pitch. And it started looking like waking up early in the morning and starting to think about what I had to do that day. And as you can imagine, my threshold for tolerating that is incredibly low. If any of my four bodies, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, start barking at me at a low level, that's when I listen. I did a lot of gaslighting myself earlier in life, and at this point, I'm unwilling to do that. That is like a strong boundary that I have with myself. It has nothing to do with anybody else, but that is the kind of thing that within me, I do not tolerate, and I'm quite strong with myself on that. And so I listened, and I started talking with the coach that I had, and I started realizing how much those things were coming up in relation to me doing more subtle things like Oh, I said that I would cook dinner at the end of the night. I am completely exhausted. I went and got this stuff. I'm completely exhausted to actually make it. What I really want to do is go pull out something from the freezer or even just order something. But I'm going to tell myself the story of what I want to do with my food conceptually and then make myself do it. Now, here's the thing, right? This is a nuanced discussion because on some level, me cooking at home for myself is what I want to do. But day to day, some days are great for that. And that's exactly what I should do. And some days, especially when I'm traveling a lot and doing a lot and working a lot and creating a lot, that is grossly inappropriate, right? One neutral choice can be really, really great or really, really bad. And the trick is, it's up to us to determine that. So I began to realize I needed more resources day in and day out that helped me center back into the femininity. And I realized that my bedtime routine, powering down from the day, even, let's generalize it, not even evening routine, how was I going to communicate with my brain, with my body, and with my entire system that I am done working? The masculinity that I use at work with being in clinic and making medical doctor level decisions, dealing with life and death kind of stuff, family things, all of that is great. I choose to do it, but I also then need to shore up for myself how I'm going to remember to turn it off and to settle back into who I am naturally. So bedtime routine became evening routine, and the evening routine has become much, much broader. So what I really have is a much wider list of resources that address this problem. It's not even a problem, address this occurrence happening in the world. And what I did was I went by the four bodies and I said, what are my options that I have to choose from on any given day that allow me to center back into myself and then bring up, allow to be expressed, naturally show who I naturally am, understanding that I have the awareness to know that I am feminine. So then what did that look like? So with the four bodies, this version was it's kind of similar to what I'd done in the past. Like the pendulum had been normalized a little bit more, but the categories were just so much more broad all of a sudden than I had ever had it. So what are the kind of things that I've been thinking about? For me, my mental body is incredibly active. I mean, you guys, there's 18 seasons of this podcast, and we've only been doing it a couple of years, right? So, like, our ability to generate thought leadership, thought content, to share ideas is massive. That's just true for both of us. And that's cool. Not everybody's like that. Some people are. A lot of people are. And that's cool. So that's great. But it's the double-edged sword. I can create all I want, but at some point, if it starts hurting me where I'm overthinking too much, well, then that's going to harm me. So it's like, instead of having a sword that you use to do something with, it's just swinging around wildly, cutting yourself. So with that, my mental body was interesting. That one had to be quite filled out, but most of it was either decreasing my attachment to whatever thoughts I wanted to, I'm going to worry about this thing at work. I'm going to worry about this thing that I'm creating. What am I going to do here? What do I think about this? And actually just slowing down my mind. So it was a lot of options for pumping the brakes for my mind. How am I going to create more space for myself within thoughts? And how can I slow that train down from the day more intentionally and coast into the evening and then night. That part was really cool because by the morning I stopped waking up with a bunch of racing thoughts. So that was really, really cool pretty much right away. The other category of the things that I was thinking through and creating for myself is the side of it where people call these like distraction. Some people call it numbing. I call it shifting your attention, shifting your focus, because it's a neutral thing. In my opinion, it's not numbing if you intentionally choose to be doing an activity. So things that went on the list for me were watching things like putting National Geographic on so that I'm watching the whales and I'm not thinking about work. Now, this is not a way to numb out thoughts that I need to think, right? These were intentionally placed on the list as options when I have determined that there's nothing else that I need to get done, and it is the appropriate thing for me to shift my attention away from productive or constructive, I'm doing air quotes, times, and this is when I'm chilling, right? There's nothing else that I need to do. So watching the whales sounds like a great idea. Check. So those kind of things, sitting outside, looking at the stars, watching the people walk past, whatever. These are not like, and then I read a book on self-development. Some of that was on there, but some of it was really just allowing my mental body to have the gift of like taking it easy, and not even working on it from like I'm healing myself, I am developing myself, that's what that other category is for, the intentionality of slowing down your thoughts and then deciding what you're going to do with them. This category is where you just release, allow, and this is also the category where we remind ourselves to have fun, right? So I'm like, oh, watching TV is bad, but honestly, if I've gotten all my work done and did all my self-development, I did my homework for my coaches, I have done whatever I said I needed to do for the day, what is so bad about learning about whales? You know what I mean? And so and it's fun. I enjoy it. I'm nerdy, so whatever. I like learning stuff. So that category was really, really key for me personally. And I had never had such broad choices for that. And boy, like I said, it's been working great for that. That's awesome. The next one that was really high was physical body, because when I'm in my head, I'm popping in my body. So it's interesting. The problem, quote, so to speak, had a big list, lots of options, lots of resources, lots of things to choose from. And then what I needed instead, what was underrepresented, needed a lot too. So I actually was catching my mind with my body. So what was I doing there with my body? It really was helping me feel my body, to experience my body, and to actually think through what felt good in terms of touch, in terms of food, fuel, hydration. Did I want to get into a bath? Did I want to stand under running water? Water is a big thing for me, so I had multiple options. Is it going outside? Is it grounding with my bare feet? Right? What did I need to do? Self-hug, self-touch, cross-by touch. I mean, all sorts of stuff that I was talking on the list. And if you feel like you're short on resources and you haven't yet come to, well, we only had one in Virginia, but in August in Dallas, we're doing our Habit Transformation Accelerator, and this is all the stuff that we're going to be talking about. So, and more, obviously, it's 2 days. It's only $297, but it is the content's well worth thousands of dollars, because all of these resources we will go through. So if you're feeling like, oh, I wish you were giving me the list, well, come to Dallas. You'll hear it. So in August 23rd and 24th. All right, so, and then, of course, if you haven't been to level 1 with us for certification, reach out to us. Let's hop on the phone, because if this is sounding good, then let's chat. There's lots to do, and most people don't have the resources hammered down. But since we talk so much on the podcast about stuff, I know that you all have, resources at your disposal in each category. So physical body stuff then really became more about centering. And because I had chronic pain too, I have began to stack more and more somatic exercises, self-soothing hand positions, just a lot of touch, and then also bringing in with some sexual abuse history, then bringing in other people too as part of the options for that. So those two categories were really, really filled up. Then the emotional category and the energetic category also were not short though. You know what I mean? It's not that they were significantly shorter, it's just that they had slightly less. I do a lot of emotional processing in real time. That's what works best for me. There are times where I choose to process something later, but that is often only because of something else happening. There's often something else going on. If I don't need to do that, I don't. I have realized how much me not processing my emotion holds me back from my goals and results and the manifestations that I want to pop in. If I'm sitting there going, oh no, I'm so sad this hasn't happened yet. I need to go look for me. And for a lot of people, I need to go look at processing. What is in the way of this? Why am I not yet feeling like this is for me, right? Even if consciously I want it, what is happening here? Something is discongruent. And so because that is the case for me, usually the emotional processing is unpacking anything I didn't get to. Often I have done the emotional processing tools, the movements of the body, the actual kind of processes that move the energy through my body and ensure that it is gone and that I have expressed it and moved it through my body fully. So it's not stored in my organs, not stored in my body, not creating disease. And so I'm shoring up. Oftentimes that is more for doing some retrospective analysis. Now that I'm past the point of processing it and I can have some clarity and maybe some levity, some things you just take really seriously and then later you're like, wait, I don't need to be that intense about it. How do I want to unpack it? Oftentimes for me, this is talking it out, but journaling and further moving the energy and using processes to get lessons from it and have your aha moments and decide what you're going to do with all that. That's what it looks like for me. And so that often is merged with something else. It's often like a thought that I'm having and something I'm ruminating on. And I realize one of the things on my list had to be a worry list, right? So I actually put when I'm home and powered down for the day, my worry list is readily accessible. And if I have a worry, I'm like, let me write it down. I can worry about it later, but I won't forget it. When the thought comes up again, I tell the mental gremlins, hey, the worry that you're feeling from this thought, you already got it remembered. Tonight it's too late to take care of this, but tomorrow we're going to handle it. Or next week is going to be the perfect time to handle that, or this weekend, right? So I talk back to this, but oftentimes the emotion that was bugging me and keeping me in my head and out of my body was something like, ooh, I didn't get to this, or oh, this didn't happen, or oh, I can't forget about that. What's going to happen here? All of that with the worry list helped me keep track of it and work with it in a way where I wasn't denying it. I'm not lying to myself. I'm not sweeping it under the rug or like ignoring it. It's just that I'm acknowledging I'm not handling it now because now is not the time. When that makes it neutral, then, I can remind myself of what I'm doing and then keep on processing the emotions around it. And I found that to be incredibly helpful, not only for the emotions that follow, but even tracking back to the mental body itself. So this is where now we can start to get all these unique combinations. It might be worry and you're feeling it in your body and it's giving you a stomach ache, right? it can look like a bunch of different things, then is not the time to be worrying about your supplements if that's how it is, right? Like that may not be what's going on. That's not where the stomach ache is coming from. And yet most people go physical body solution. It's a lot more magical and cross covered than that. And in my opinion, when it comes to resources, that's a great thing because cross coverage is always protective, in my opinion, right? Yeah, so that was and then energetically it's a fairly long list, but lots of options in terms of how am I going to make my space, my energy field, what am I choosing to do with me that helps me understand how I interface in the world. Where do I belong? What is for me? Where am I going? Where am I leading myself? What choices do I want to make? Who am I? Who am I becoming? What am I letting go of? What is not for me? What is real juicy right now? And the options are an outflow of asking these questions. What do I need to do tonight that makes my space and makes me feel amazing? It makes me feel at ease, safe, secure, loved, connected. That might be calling my little sister or talking to her on Snapchat, right? That might, and it doesn't even have to be energy work, though. That's certainly on my list. I have lots of energy work processes. We teach those as certifications and our programs. So all of those tools are certainly on that list. But more than that, a lot of people, I think, hone in on the energy work part of it and then often say, well, I'm not someone who can do energy work. I don't know enough, or I'm not that kind of person. I'm not an energy person. But that's not even the majority of the stuff on the list. There's a lot of energy processes that I love and lean on heavily. But even activities like talking to my sister that come from a question of what do I want to do that feels like it feeds my soul right now are, to me, just as powerful. And in some ways, because we are in a human body and we value real life experiences, in some ways, those are more meaningful. I mean, the number of times I've heard people being like, I had a soul retrieval done, or I had energy work and I did feel better. But like, I'm not sure if they did anything. Like, do they really know what they're doing, right? It's very easy to discount that kind of stuff. Until you have the energy in your field, until you have the personal power to actually see it, feel it, and know it can be very confusing. And creating that energy and the power within you often looks like getting yourself evidence. So I love that list of energy tools and the things that can help me power down and get into my femininity to feel the way that I want to cultivate feeling. It's honestly so much more fun in some ways, and it's so powerful, and we get to really have things that we don't need a second guess. I mean, we still can. Listen, the mental gremlins can be tough, but that's choices we make too. But the energy of it, taking intentionality out in the world and creating these experiences of how I want to be, how I want to belong, how I want to make sense of life, then become really crucial. And it's interesting because often there's small actions, just making the choice to put yourself to talk with your loved one at the end of the day, for me, instead of doing some work, or even sometimes reading a book, which is distracting for my mental body. But that connection piece at the end of the day, after I have given a lot of myself, as an MD, as a coach, there's a lot to give it. To have that connection tanks me back up. And, the choice is to go do that activity. It happens pretty much in a second, and then there's no other work involved. That's literally it. So I really love having this as activities like this as the options under the energy body because they're easy and they're powerful. And by golly, if that combination isn't what most people are looking for, right? They want powerful and they want to do it with the least amount of work as possible. So thank goodness that stuff like that actually exists, right? And we have things like that at our disposal. So I can say that my evening routine now is starting to get more and more locked in. And that is to say, I'm feeling more and more comfortable remembering the options, choosing from the options, and then executing on them without second guessing if I did the right thing. Yeah, so 4 different things that I just went through, 4 different steps. That as I get the feedback of, oh, that didn't work, or oh, that did work, and it depends on how the night went, then that determines what I scratch off the list, what I add, or what I realize, oh, these 2 choices deserve to be on the list, but if this is happening in my life, then that's not the ones I should pick. That's not going to work as well. So as I've been going through that process, I have noticed that the rest that I'm getting, the clarity of thoughts and the perspective that I hold when I wake up in the morning, and my ability to stick with that, like stick with the peace and the ease and the flow that often like you start the day with and then just life and happens, then that is extended for longer. So the more that I meet my authentic needs and actually step into my femininity, which I crave through all of these choices, then my day and my experience of my day has become more and more smooth, and it's enough that I want to keep going. I'm not done. So I don't, TBD on future discussions on this, but if I have significant updates, I will make an update episode, because I don't necessarily know how far this rabbit hole goes down. I don't really know how much ease and flexibility and creativity and passion and creation I can have in life. I honestly don't. I haven't gotten there yet. But this process gives me a structure to build upon it. So often I feel that people are willy-nilly with their resources. They'll learn about stuff, and then because they're not creating these frameworks and structures of how do I fire up strategies, when do I do it, which one is best for what time, how do I build on to reiterate, how do I go back without making my mental gremlins go, well, you're going backwards and you haven't been doing it good enough. If we don't shore up these things intentionally, I do believe this is where people spin their wheels, and so they work hard, they try, they're doing all the difficult emotional stuff, they're battling their mental gremlins, but at the same time, it's just still very chaotic. But here's the kicker: the things that they want aren't happening. And a lot of people, because it happens so commonly, they accept that as okay. But I'm going to invite you to consider that while common, this falls under the not normal category. We can, and I think should, keep track of and create things for ourselves that really allow us to get and create what we need and what we want. And so this kind of intentionality and strategy talk and all this stuff, it's not very sexy, but at the same time, it works. It does we understand ourselves better, the self-awareness is higher, and we really just move ourselves through life in a way that feels much, much better to us. the last thing I'm going to add to this whole discussion is that one thing I've noticed for mental gremlins for me personally that has really helped as I've gone through this reiteration and feedback stage is gratitude. I I luckily, with the help of my coach, established very early on that this is an act of self-love. This is me saying, I like what I'm creating in life, and I'm further going to interact with it in even better ways. I will make it better and better and better for myself. And so I already determined that I was very grateful for myself for doing that. And so one thing that continually helps me and assists me in sticking with doing this work for myself, not for anybody else, sticking with it because I remind myself that I am grateful for myself doing this work. And I choose to actually think the thoughts or say out loud or write down for myself that reality every day. It might seem redundant, but if I'm parenting my own inner child, it's like the same mentality as me saying, well, my parents told me they loved me once. I should just know because it's still true. Maybe, but that doesn't often feel as good to people. That's not what most people want. And so the way that I am choosing to treat my inner child then is every day. That's kind of the non-negotiable. There's lots of options on this list, but the non-negotiable, and even if that's the only one, the gratitude is there, because that gratitude gets me out of my head of my problems and back into, okay, wait, I'm making choices for myself, and I like the choices I'm making, and I like how far I've come, and I'm grateful for myself for having done that. That says nothing about how far I have left to go. That says nothing about the mistakes I made along the way. Because that's not the time for it. There's plenty of times to dig into that stuff. This moment in my life at the end of the day is not it, right? I'm not going to torture myself with that stuff when I'm not going to do anything about it at the end of the day. I should be getting ready for bed, and why ruin my own sleep? So the gratitude one, I think this list has to be customized. But I will say on that particular one, I would encourage everyone to consider something like that added to the list because of what it does in keeping you moving further and further ahead in life from a place of, yeah, I treat myself well, therefore I am motivated to keep making my life better and better. It's motivation as a strategy through gratitude rather than trying to berate yourself as a motivation strategy. So that's why I feel so strongly about it being on there, and why I think it works so very well no matter what you got going on in life or what you've done. All right, so this was a longer one, longer discussion, but there was a lot of things to unpack here about evening routines, femininity, self-awareness, the whole bit. So I'm sending you lots of love, and I will catch you on the next episode.